Adam Smith, in The Wealth of Nations, published in 1776, asks one great question: why are some nations wealthy? And writing in 1776 from Scotland, he was well positioned to observe and to ask this question because he could see the first fruits of the Industrial Revolution, which had started in Great Britain. And Smith realizes that Great Britain and its society are wealthier than other parts of the world. And so Smith asks, what is it that causes this? Why are some nations wealthy? And in the great first book of The Wealth of Nations, Smith provides the answer. And in fact, it is the very first section of Book 1, the division of labor. Smith says, if we try and observe why it is that some societies are wealthier than others, then we will realize that it is because of the division of labor. Smith says, take an example. Take a pin maker, which is a kind of piece that went on a coat. He says, in a traditional society, say a farmer who wanted to have a coat would make these pins for himself. And maybe he could make 10 pins a day. Well, why could he only make 10 pins a day? Because he's one person working at it, and he has to do all of the various steps that are necessary to produce this article. Smith says, if we observe what's happening around us, we can see that the production of the pin today relies upon an extreme division of labor. Smith says, in our society, instead of having an individual who wants to produce a pin perform each of the individual steps himself and make 10 pins a day, we have a system where we have divided up the various steps between laborers, the division of labor, so that there are 18 different steps in this production process. And each one has someone who specializes in that particular aspect of the production process. And we have factories where these pins are made, and they make thousands a day. And so the equivalent, if you divide it out, is something like 4,000 pins per person, whereas an individual working on himself, say, can make 10. In this factory system, because the labor is divided, it allows specialization, and it allows far greater productivity. And so the amount of product per person is vastly higher in this system because of the division of labor. Smith says, look at all the things that the division of labor allows. It allows specialization, so you get very, very good at your individual step. He says it allows you to save time because you don't have to walk around with all of your things. You can stay in place and just do that one task. He says it allows expertise, and that allows technological innovation. Because if all you do all day is one step in that production process, then your mind will be thinking, how can we make this more efficient? And Smith says, I know of a case of a 10-year-old boy who was involved in a certain kind of firing machine, and he came up with an invention that saved huge amounts of labor. All of this is the result of the division of labor. And he says, if you look around, the universal opulence that we see in our society is the result of the division of labor. And Smith uses that exact phrase, universal opulence. He says, if we observe our society, we will see a general plenty that diffuses itself even to the lowest ranks of society. Those are profoundly meaningful words in the first book of The Wealth of Nations. Because Smith says, look, the division of labor is the cause of this wealth. It allows specialization and innovation and time savings. And what it does is it allows a general plenty. It allows a universal opulence that spreads itself even to the lowest ranks of society. So Smith says that this economic growth is unleashed by the process of industrialization, by the division of labor. And the results, the fruits of this increase in productivity are diffused. They are shared. It's a very optimistic picture of industrialization. It says everyone is richer. That's what universal opulence means. It's good across the board for everybody. The general plenty that diffuses itself. It's general. It's not that some people profit and other people suffer. It's a general plenty. And so Smith's vision in The Wealth of Nations is that this process of transformation is, on balance, highly beneficial across the society, that it has broad distributive effects that are positive. And so this is the vision of the wealth of nations, that industrialization is a positive thing, that it unleashes productivity and does so in a way that benefits the common person. And there's something else important to notice about the assumptions that Smith makes in Book 1 of The Wealth of Nations, about the assumptions that he makes about the nature of the human person and about the relationship between the individual and society. Smith says that this general opulence that the division of labor creates isn't the result of some grand design. There's no central design. There's no overall scheme that someone has intentionally built to diffuse this opulence. He says this comes about, he says in a later passage, because of an invisible hand, that there isn't an intentional design, but somehow there's an order that emerges spontaneously out of human interactions and out of human nature. Smith says very famously that the wealth that is created by the division of labor comes out of the human being's natural disposition to truck, barter, and exchange. For Smith, there's something natural about the human being as an economic being. Now, this is very different, isn't it, from Aristotle, who imagines the individual as a political creature who can only flourish in the context of their polis, their political community, through the exercise of their natural faculties of speech and reason. It's different, too, from the Roman vision, which draws from the Aristotelian idea of the citizen, but also places greater emphasis on humans as virtuous producers, as agriculturalists. Smith's is even more different from that. For Smith, human beings are naturally economic creatures. We have an innate tendency to truck, barter, and exchange. And it's this innate tendency, our self-interest to trade on our own behalf, that causes the kinds of exchange that we see in this society. And the division of labor, he says, is limited by the extent of the market. And so the direct corollary of the division of labor is the rise of the market, a place where humans exchange, where they trade commodities, where they trade labor. And so for Smith, the division of labor is part and parcel of the rise of markets, and this is human destiny. This is where the human being naturally belongs. The kind of creature we are naturally disposed to truck, barter, and exchange. And so for Smith, there's a spontaneous social order that emerges out of the individuals acting in their own self-interest, trucking, bartering, and exchanging, trading, that causes this new kind of society, this industrializing society, this wealthy society to emerge.